Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Rip City Real Talk with Anthony Blaylock and Craig Moshkow. We're so excited to be back with you guys after a tumultuous week as a Blazer fan. It's been kind of up and
Yeah,
down a little bit, but how you feeling, man?
I'm doing all right, man. Personally, enjoying the sunshine. It's nice to have the sun back in Portland. The little bit that we get throughout the year. So everything's going good with that. And I'm feeling all right about the team still.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird week. So we talked last week on the pod. There was only three games. We have to cover Miami, Boston, and San Antonio. I was a little overly ambitious. I thought 2-1 would be doable, and you were kind of like, whoa, pump
Almost.
the brakes.
Yeah, almost. I mean, that we'll talk about the Boston loss, but that was a killer. But it was also encouraging for
Yeah.
multiple different reasons, to be honest with you. But we'll start off with the negative. We'll start off with the blowout against Miami that really we were competitive in for most of the game until that third quarter, that dreaded third quarter.
Yeah, some of my notes from that game, I wrote that the trap was really strong defensively on Dame. Our defense was nowhere near the energy level that theirs was. I mean, they brought this super hardcore trapping defense. They were swarming everybody. We looked a little more lethargic. And then I wrote, "What's up with Dame? Like, what's going on with him? He doesn't look good." And maybe we got the answer because he rested the next two games with that hamstring bug. So maybe it's just a little bit of an injury, or he's nicked up. I mean, what do you think's going on?
Well, he didn't rest. He played against Boston pretty the entire time, but he did miss the Spurs game. I think the knee's been ailing him for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's serious enough for him to obviously miss time, but I definitely think it's impacting him. Just pushing off to hit a shot or being able to drive at his normal level. He's getting a lot of contact. He's not getting a lot of calls. He's come out and publicly and basically said, I'm not getting the calls some of these other guys are getting. I'm driving. He put up the stats. He drives like in the top four at his position, and his or the foul percentage that he gets called is nowhere near what the other guys that are up there with him and drives and contact are getting. And so he got the two technicals. He's been complaining to the refs a lot about it. You're coming from a guy that was one of the league leaders in free throws last year, and all of a sudden this year he's down significantly on the calls that he's getting.
Yeah.
And I think people talk about it a lot. You hear the media and Hurd and Kent talk about it all the time about how he's not a flopper, how he's going to be the guy that's going to go through the contact. He's going to continue to try to finish the play, and he doesn't look to show that he got hit.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if maybe that's something that he needs to adjust, but beyond that, he's taking a lot of contact, and that knee I think has been bugging him. It's been bruised. He keeps banging it. I swear to God, every game he's banging it against somebody, and he's limping around and grimacing. So I'm not sure how much that's impacting him. I think just the schedule as well. All these back-to-back games, all these condensed scheduling with the weeks, the road trips. I think that wears on a guy like Dame, especially when you're the only point of attack on your offense. I mean, CJ's great and he's there, but let's face it. I mean, this team is riding Dame's shoulders, and I think just that amount of energy with the banged up knee and all that is really affecting him late in the season.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, the knee has been, you can tell it's bothering him a little bit. The other thing is, when you watch Dame, sometimes he looks really explosive and at other times he doesn't. And I would say lately he hasn't looked that explosive. He's not getting around guys as much unless he has a distinct advantage on the drive. So it's just something to watch. I really think that the Blazers need to be careful. Something that we are going to cover on the pod is this week there was a massive rash of injuries that popped up. I mean, Jamal Murray hurt his knee. I saw Donovan Mitchell sprained his ankle. So there's just guards that are playing heavy minutes right now are starting to kind of wear down a little bit at this point in the season. Take it easy. I'd rather be a 7 seed with a healthy Dame than risk his health, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. And then, so you go from that Miami game that just, again, I mean, we can touch on it all we want, but I agree with you. I think the energy level was the number one thing to me. There's a reason they're a top 10 defense. And yeah, Jimmy Butler is obviously a huge piece of that. Bam Adebayo is a great center,
Mm-hmm.
but at the end of the day, it's just an energy thing again. I mean, those guys are constantly in your face. They're constantly in front of you. They got length to do it. It just doesn't look like you're right. I mean, again, everybody wants to get on Stotts about the defensive adjustments and schemes, and I'm sure there's a plenty of that there. But we've talked about all year the energy level of this team and the effort that is given can make up for a lot of however you want to put it with Stotts defense. But
Yeah.
it's becoming a pretty significant issue in my opinion that they're just not out there running out hustling after guys. They're constantly having the chase because they're not getting around screens.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, yeah, you give a team like that any kind of a lead, they're going to stop you, and then they're going to be able to put up points. They're a good offensive team as well.
Well, and I wrote down, so Nurk looked really good. He was great in that Miami game. The last thing I wrote, Melo went scoreless in 16 minutes. I mean, if you're sometimes when we are lethargic, we're going to go as far as Melo can take us. I mean, I know that's weird to say, but if Dame is off or CJ's not having a really good game, sometimes Melo needs to be the third best scorer on the team, and he went scoreless in 16 minutes. We're not really going to have a chance to win that ball game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, agreed. I mean, we've talked about it all year. We talked about it last week, especially with our bench right now. And the bench problems are going to continue because we just don't have any kind of scoring realistically outside of Melo. No consistent threat. I mean, Anthony had a great game against the Spurs, but that was out of necessity. I mean, he's not going to get those minutes because obviously Dame rested. But when it comes to Melo, you see how the team performs when he's on. I think Boston was a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
We saw him come out. I mean, against Boston, he went
Huge.
Let's take a look here. He went 10 of 15, hit 3 threes, got 25 points. We ended up losing by 1, granted. But that's the kind of performances that we seem to get when Carmelo is on. So it just sucks because I don't like using him. I don't like running the offense through him off the bench. I like it when he gets his opportunities and he takes advantage of it, but I don't like force feeding him. But at the same time,
he was red
you
hot
still
in
can't
that
trust
Boston.
Little.
Yeah.
No. What people are talking about national TV Melo over here. It's like whenever he gets on TNT, he seems to show out. But it's just a matter of him hitting his shots, and he's the kind of guy. That's how his offense is going to be all year. It's going to be whether or not he hits those jumpers or if he doesn't hit those jumpers. And we go as far as he's going to take us on that bench unit.
Absolutely. And so in the Boston game, first of all, okay, so it's a 1-point loss to Boston. I know Boston was around 500 a week or two ago, so a lot of NBA fans will look at their record, but they've been banged up. Kemba wasn't playing very good until about 2-3 weeks ago, and now he's on just a heater. They're getting healthy and they're looking better. So a 1-point loss to Boston. The other thing about that game was it came down to the final minute or so. We almost fell too far behind in the third quarter, but it came down to the last minute or so. And then Dame missed a 3 to basically take the lead. And then Tatum went down and hit this monster 3 on CJ. That game was literally a 1-possession game. If we make a shot and they miss a shot, we're talking about a completely different narrative this week, right? And so I think that it's a little annoying when people see a loss like that and they want to use it on Blazers Edge to capitalize on the fire stot stuff. But it's like, this is also a make or miss league. This is a league where if Dame hits a shot and Tatum misses a fadeaway 3-point, we're talking about a totally different week. So.
Agreed. I mean, technically wasn't a 3; it was a long 2, and there was a lot made. There was a lot made up of the timeout that Stotts called with 40 seconds to go.
Yeah,
that was a big deal. A lot of people didn't understand why we did that, why we didn't just save the timeout. If they were just going to have Dame take a shot anyway, but I don't think people understand. You do that for the 2-for-1.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you call that timeout. You call it with 40 seconds so that you can try to do, whether it be a clean look down the court to get up there without having guys in your face, or a successful inbound. You don't have to run the length of the court. You do that to try to get Dame the shot that Dame got, so that whether it's a make or miss, the idea is that you get the last shot no matter what happens. And so Dame goes down. You're right. He misses that too. Honestly, it was a good look for him. People say that he should have passed to Melo. Melo was wide open in that corner, and Melo was hot all game, sure. But Damian Lillard is the guy who's going to take this shot every time. There's a reason he's the league leader, one of the league leaders in clutch scoring. Bang knee or not, when Dame has a decent look at a 2-point shot, just inside the 3-point line with the guy kind of away from him, you're going to let Dame pull up and take that shot. If you make that past our Carmelo, we don't know that he's going to immediately turn around and make that shot. We don't know the defender's not going to get in his face. And again, you're trying to hit that magical number of 32, 31 seconds. All right, so Dame misses it. I agree with you completely. He makes that. We go up by, I think they would have put us up by at that point 1.
Yes.
Because we were down 1. And then, Tatum goes down on the other end. He hits that clutch 3 over CJ. Again, we've talked about CJ, and honestly, he was in a decent position, but he's just too small. You can't have CJ McCollum on Tatum. Like, that's a play where either Jones needs to be out there or Covington needs to be on him.
Agreed.
You have to have a better wing defender out there on the guy who's a little bit taller and has been hot. Anyway, he shot it over CJ. You're absolutely right. Sucks. We missed it. He didn't make it. We go down 4. Powell pulls off his best Dame impression and hits a logo 3. Great. Good job, Powell. We go down by 1, but then the free throws, we had the foul, and we know what happens, right? They purposely missed the free throw, and that's that.
Yeah, if you want to criticize Stotts in that game, I understand the criticism of the timeout, but that's a pretty typical Blazer thing to do to try to get the 2-for-1. I think if you want to criticize Stotts, it's playing Melo the last 2 minutes of a game where it's like sometimes there was defensive only plays where we only were going to be defending, at the end of the game there. And he has Melo and CJ out there. And it's like predictable we would get scored on by Tatum if he's got CJ on him at the top of the key. I mean, CJ tries really hard, but he's just a small guard with not a huge wingspan. So he's not going to be able to give Tatum problems. He's not going to be able to agitate him. The other thing that I mean, if you want to talk about a big Melo game, I'm kind of nervous that big Melo games like that means he's going to keep his 20 to 25 minutes. So that kind of stuff actually makes me nervous. Should I be more like, okay, great, we have another weapon in the arsenal, or should I be worried that him scoring 25 means he's going to get a longer leash?
I agree with you 100%. I don't want to see Melo continue to get the kind of minutes he's getting. I think it's at this point inevitable. I mean, Stotts is going to continue to use him. He's going to get the minutes. I mean, we can beat this dead horse all we want and continue to talk about our thoughts on Melo. Regardless, I think no matter what you do, it's going to have to roll through them. They didn't go out in the buyout market and get a viable offensive threat off the bench.
Yeah.
Jones gets moved to the bench instead of Powell going to the bench to replace Trent. So not only do you lose Trent's shooting, you get a little bit more defense, sure, but you don't have the offense. And even so, Jones isn't getting the minutes. Again, you can't rely on Anthony. He's barely been playing. He's not going to be part of the rotation come playoff time unless Dame has to miss any time. Maybe an injury lingers or what have you, but he's not going to be out there. And then it's who do you have? You have Cantor, who, Cantor can give you a bench scoring, but that's more on putbacks. And honestly, when CJ or Dame are out there with him, he may be coming off the bench, but Nurk's been on the minutes thing. So really Cantor's playing big minutes and mostly with the starters before Nurk comes back in. So I don't count him. I mean, you kind of have to count him as your bench, but he's not the bench unit guy. Like, that's all going to be Melo. Nasir Little, again, not a guy you're running the offense through. He's opportunistic. He's looked good, but they're not going to run the offense through him. And rightfully so. His defense is still a little bit raw. He has all the athletic gifts in the world, but it's going to come down with playing time. And again, I understand people think he needs to play more. I personally think he needs to play more, but people have to understand that you're coming down to playoff time. You're going to start tightening up these rotations. Guys like Nas and Amp, as good as they can show flashes of, I don't know if you can rely on them to play big minutes rotating wise. And that's a problem for the team with the bench in general.
Well, and the other thing is, so Norman Powell has been pretty consistent. So I don't want to take any minutes away from Norman Powell. He's been playing his butt off on defense. I wish DJ could be out there more, but at times DJ gets lost. And I don't, like we've talked about in the pod before, I did write down in both of those games, both in Boston and against Miami, I said, we look like we have more athleticism on this team than we've ever had in the past. Whether or not we can use it and unlock it is really kind of the key to the game, right? If we can get guys like DJ and Powell going down to the rim and either dunking or converting at the rim, it makes the game a lot easier for us. But I also think that we have to hit shots to unlock that, right? Like we have to earn that privilege by the defense respecting us. So it's if the game is going right, we look great. If the game isn't going right, we look terrible. And that's happened a lot this second half of the season as we're trying to integrate these guys.
It's true. I mean, you're right. We have tons of athleticism, but we don't have shooters. I mean, Covington can shoot, but all the shooters we have are really in the starting unit. I mean, Carmelo can go out there and he's going to be hit or miss. We've talked about it. Honestly, Little's 3 hasn't looked terrible, and Jones has been known to hit a 3 or 2 here and there, but they're not shooters. Like, you're not out there to get them an open 3-point shot. I mean, that's how the offense kind of runs through, and that's what they end up getting, but that's not why you have them on the team. So it's tough because a lot of those guys are better off slashing to the rim and having somebody who can pass that ball to them and get them good looks like we just don't have because we didn't get a backup point guard.
I think the biggest thing is at this point, offensively, we know what we're going to need to do, right? We're going to need to hit shots. We're going to need to drag people out to the perimeter. And then hopefully Dame and CJ can facilitate the way that they need to. In my opinion, this week, the biggest problem was defense. Again, it's still defense. And I think that we
can always be defense.
Yeah, I think we have to look at Nas or DJ and play them more for defensively, in my opinion. I mean, I understand Melo got hot in that Boston game, but I don't know why in the Miami game we'd play him 16 minutes when he just looked off the whole time. I understand that we want to try to outscore everybody we play, but I think at some point Stotts has to look internally and say, I got to play DJ 20 to 25 minutes and pair him up with CJ in that second unit and get him a lot more run, because the second unit can get run off the floor defensively. They look terrible at times. And sometimes Dame will be trying to catch some rest, and the next thing you know, we're down 15 points, and it's just ugly in the third quarter.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good transition point to the Spurs game, because we talked about Dame getting that rest. We've talked about the knee, but it turns out he had a hamstring issue, which is, in my opinion, even scarier, because I don't like the soft tissue stuff. Soft tissue stuff to me, with the wear and tear this season and how hard he has to continue to play, that's a big concern. And that's something that fans really need to keep an eye on. I haven't looked to see if he's going to be out tonight or not.
He is not playing tonight.
Yeah, I was gonna say, assuming he'd be questionable at the very least. So it sounds like he's gonna sit out again, and that's smart, because the hamstring is gonna be a big deal. That worries me. Again, I don't like the soft tissue stuff. Groins, hamstrings, that stuff to me, when you have a guy that most of his game is revolved on going to the rim. I mean, yeah, Dame's a great shooter, but he's able to get those shots because people have to worry about him going to the rim. And if he can't slash, or that becomes an issue leading into playoffs, you might as well, write us off now. I think we're going to struggle in the playoffs regardless, but that's a big deal.
That'd be terrible. I think with Dame, they just got to rest him till his entire legs feel healthy. Like if he's feeling tightness in the hamstring, if his knee is feeling a little sore, because Jamal Murray played on a sore knee, but it was his right knee that was hurting him, and then he tore the Achilles in his left knee. Because what happens is you can kind of compensate for that.
The Achilles.
So just literally.
I know.
Just literally rest him until he feels healthy.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to the San Antonio game. So Dame had to rest. I mean, I had low expectations. I know San Antonio is like a 8, 9, 10 seed team in the West right now, but with no Dame, I kind of had low expectations for our performance, and we came out and kind of hustled.
Yeah, we're 3-0 without Dame this year, which is kind of a funny thing to say. So no Dame. CJ looked great. I mean, again, CJ did exactly what we needed CJ to do. He kind of struggled in that Boston game. To me, that's one of the big reasons we lost that game. Aside, people can say defense and the timeout, whatever they want to say, but CJ shot terrible. I mean, he hit a clutch 3 at the end, but his offensive output was terrible. So, you worry about that leading into the Spurs game. Again, we're going to have to lean heavily on CJ, and CJ just comes out and just puts up a casual 13 to 26 on 29 points, 6 assists, so 50% shooting. Looks great. Does what he needs to do. Everybody really put out a good game. Powell had one of his best games of the year. He got 22 points. He looked great. 8 of 17. Did what he needed to do. Hit the threes. Everybody realistically shot pretty well. I don't think anybody really got below the 40% marker. I don't think Nurk had shot great. Yeah, 4 of 11. So Nurk was probably the only anomaly there when it came to scoring. Jones went 0 of 2. You take 2 shots. I mean, doesn't really bug me that much. But either way, it was a solid win. They had to fight back. We only got the 1-point win. I think at one point in the third quarter we were down 16.
Yeah, so that was so nerve-wracking. And I don't know how we got down 16. Like, I don't know what happened, but I mean, I think a big shout to somebody who played really well. A guy, Anthony Simons, was 16 points, but he hit every 3, it felt like, for a while to keep us in that game. Against the Spurs, I mean, the Spurs do a lot of things. Pop throws a lot of different monkey wrenches at you. And when you don't have your best player in Dame, I was pretty impressed that we came out and battled that hard. Rocco is unbelievably good defensively. I mean, maybe he's not the one-on-one lockdown defender that a lot of fans thought he was, but if he's not the best help defender in the league, he's got to be top 3 or 4, because the dude is always getting clutch defensive possessions for us. If the game is close in the fourth quarter, he usually delivers. The other thing, when you're looking at San Antonio, it's good to get a win on them because they've been kind of hot over the last, second half of the season. And for some reason, I see them as being one of those play-in teams. And with Pop, I don't want to play them at all. Like, I don't want them to be in the play-in. I felt good about getting that win, honestly.
Yeah, they're a young, athletic team. They don't really have a bona fide star. I mean, DeRozan's probably – I can't say he's not a star. I guess I should refrain from saying that. But DeRozan's not part of their future. Let's put it that way. They've built a core around guys like Keldon Johnson and White and some of these other guys that are going to come out.
Murray's really good.
Well, yeah, all of them. All these guys are super athletic. Mm-hmm. They're kind of sneaky that way. I mean, Jakob Portal. That guy, his name bugs me, but again, they make the decision to remove themselves from LaMarcus. They mutually buy out with him, and they decide to go a little bit younger and a little bit more athletic. And you're seeing, like you said, you're seeing it in the second half. Anytime Pop's leading the team, there's always going to be a threat. They draft certain guys. They have a certain way of playing. It's a lot of hustle. It always is. So no matter what's on that team roster-wise, they always seem to be even in their down years, one of those 8, 9, 10 seed teams every year. So agreed. There's other teams that scare me more in the play-in if it comes down to that. But I
Memphis.
would still say, well, not even. Yeah, sure. Memphis always plays us hard, but obviously Golden State,
Yeah.
the Mavericks could be one of those teams that they
Yeah.
could easily slide down into that 7, 8 seed with us. I
Sure.
mean, it's still kind of a cluster right there.
It is.
But yeah, I mean, it's
So
a solid win because they're potentially a playoff team, and these are the kind of wins that people want to see us get. And I
yep.
think some of that carries over from that Boston game. They came out. I thought they played good against Boston. Yeah, we had that little lull, that little gap there in the third quarter, but this shows the grit that we saw earlier in the season of fighting back against some of these good teams and not continue just giving up, like not just giving up on the effort. They came out and hit big shots, and we pull out a 1-point win against a team and a win we desperately need at this point in the season.
It was a good win. I mean, it's solid, and it was good to keep a week. I mean, I didn't want to go 0-3 on the week. I was telling you last night when we were prepping, I don't want to talk about an 0-3 week on the pod. I don't even know what we talk about. Obviously, like there's good things to glean from this week. But the other thing I want to ask you about is, so with Nurkic, you said, I mean, he didn't do great. I think he had 4 assists, and 6
Shooting
rebounds.
wise,
Yeah, I mean, he didn't do a lot. But our defense is 19th in the league since he came back. So, I mean, we are a better team with Nurkic, and I don't think anybody would ever argue that. He may not be lighting up the stat sheet the way Cantor does, but he does a lot of the ugly things down low that you need a center to do, especially to muck up a defense a little bit and kind of help facilitate that. How do you feel about Nurk, and when is he going to be off this quote-unquote minutes restriction?
I mean, they already have him around 25, and I think Stotts came out a week ago. And this might have been before the knee thing popped up, but they basically said we're going to try to keep him at the 20 to 25 for now. But if he's feeling good and if the situation in the game calls for it, we will probably play him more. And they haven't yet. But again, I think the knee thing kind of threw a wrench in that. But he's definitely working his way back. When he's on the court, he looks good. I think at this point, it is a matter of conditioning. I mean, we can say that his injury allows him the conditioning at a hand. Oh, yeah, he can still get out there and run. And yeah, he can. But that's completely different in practice and all of that than it is in game shape. So he's still getting back to game shape. I don't think a lot of fans understand that. They're upset why he's not playing more. And I think you guys have to understand he's a big guy, and whether or not his injury was lower body or upper body, I mean, you still have to get in the game shape. That's probably why he hurt the calf. It's probably why his knee's been bugging him, because he's going extra hard when he's out there trying to make these plays. And it's just a different pace. It's a different reaction to your body. You're having to read and cut in different ways, and you're fighting against guys that really want to stop you versus practice where a guy's not bumping you as hard. So it's going to take him a little bit of time to get back up there. I would think a couple more weeks he'll probably be playing 30 minutes a game, depending on how close it is. And you're going to see him, the way he's been playing lately, he'll get off of this whole restriction thing here pretty quick. It's easy to go to Stotts and be upset about him not playing Nurk as much, but you have to understand that it's about regular season. Yes, it's about keeping ourselves in the 6th seed and trying to avoid that playing, but it's also about playoffs. I mean, that's why we're resting Dame right now in this critical stretch. He's got a hamstring, he's got a knee. Maybe he can play, we don't know, but we're not going to play him because it's get to the point where you got to make sure these guys are right 3-4 weeks from now versus this little stretch. So he'll be out there. He'll definitely be off of it soon if he keeps playing the way he's playing. And you're absolutely right. He's the biggest key to how competitive this team will be in the playoffs.
Yeah. And you're comfortable enough with Cantor to roll him out there for 25 minutes. It's not a big deal. You don't need to play Nurkic. I mean, I understand defensively you're not going to be the same, but you got to figure that what Cantor gives you, which is almost a guaranteed double-double in 25 minutes, it may be a little more empty stat stuff, but he can give you the offensive rebounds and the putbacks to keep you in that game and keep you chugging along until Nurkic is out there. And if you play Nurkic, it's like if you play him until he gets hurt, right? Or you overdo it with him, you lose him for the rest of the year. We're never going to do anything defensively. So then we're really toast. So I'm totally fine with it. I don't understand the fans clamoring about like minutes, because that's why I said like minutes restriction, because to me, 25 minutes is a full game for Nurkic. The guy's like 300 pounds, you know what I mean? 280, the big dude, and big dudes oftentimes have knee and issues with their legs. And so I'm always watching him. I'm always a little bit nervous, but I feel like he's been doing fine in the minutes he's playing. He's just not putting up those big numbers we're used to seeing out of him sometimes.
Yeah, and I think it's more about when he plays. He's still out there closing out games if he can avoid the foul trouble. He's still playing the good stretches. I think having a guy like Cantor coming in to be able to give him a rest is a blessing, because if we had to run a guy like Harry Giles, for instance, out there instead of while Nick was hurt or during the stretch, I mean, yeah, it's a whole different animal. So
Mhm.
I agree. I think you can feel a little more comfortable with Cantor. I know you lose a lot of the defense, but Cantor's good enough at rebounding and getting putbacks and offensively keeping you in games and making up for some mistakes that you're not mad about him getting the minutes for now.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not going to be the guy you want to rely upon at your big guy position going into the playoffs necessarily, but that's exactly why you need to be really cautious with Nurk a little more than than you might think right now while he gets right.
Yeah. So, okay, just to wrap up on the San Antonio game, I felt fine about it. I felt good. I felt like our defense was much better in that game, and it could be just because that San Antonio doesn't have great scorers. I know DeRozan is solid, and they have a lot of young guys. Maybe it's just the matchup. Maybe it's just a matchup that we could take advantage of. But I felt like the defense looked a lot more energized than it did against Miami. Boston, it looked energized. We just couldn't convert it into a W, and that happens. What did you think about the Bleacher report that came out this week that said the Blazers would not include Anthony Simons in an Aaron Gordon trade? What'd you think of that?
It's, again, but you know how much stock you want to put into that. I think it sucks. I mean, again, I'm not a big fan of Aaron Gordon in general.
Right.
I don't really care for him. People can sit here and get mad at me and tell me how great Denver's been since they got him and how good their defense is since they got him. I don't care. I don't like the guy. I just haven't seen enough out of him in Orlando to really warrant wanting to spend $18 million over the next couple of years on him and the kind of assets that you may have had to given up. That being said, whether it's Aaron Gordon or really anybody, if Neil wasn't willing to trade Anthony, it's disappointing to me. We're at year 3 of Anthony right now, 4 maybe.
Yeah, 3.
So 3, and he's never going to play big minutes ever because Dame and CJ are locked into these extensions for years. I mean, 3-4 more years. If you're going to re-sign Anthony, it's going to be a low deal. He's still not going to play often. He's an injury replacement at best, and maybe eventually he grows into something off the bench that you can rely upon. But year 3, and the guy's not getting any minutes right now. Maybe that's stats. Maybe that's just because we've seen him stumble. We've had flashes of it. Certain matchups he's come out and he'll hit his shots, and his percentages aren't terrible, but he's not a good defender, and he's just not quite there yet. And that could just be experience. I don't know. But either way, I know that he's not going to be a starter on this team, and I know that he's probably not going to play big minutes ever. So it's just kind of a matter of, if you're not willing to include him in not just Aaron Gordon, but any possible trade that comes up, if some team's like, hey, we really want to get Anthony from you, and you're like, nah, it bugs me a little bit. It does. Yeah. And I understand Neil's affinity for these young, these combo guards, but if you can get something back at a different need, a more important need on this team, preferably a forward, that can maybe make a difference for you. And honestly, obviously Gordon's been playing great. You got to look into that. You got to get rid of him. I'm sorry. I like Amp. I think he has a good future in the league as a scoring young, just guard. He's young. He has all the attributes you want, but we're in playoff mode. You got Dame and CJ and potentially Nurk as your core right now. You got to get rid of these young guys and try to win now and then worry about the rebuild later.
Yeah. Sometimes we push with these all-in moves. Like, I feel like 2 firsts for Covington was an all-in move, right? It was like all the chips on the table. And then sometimes we don't. We just say, well, let's hold on to Anthony Simons. And, a lot of people thought we wouldn't trade Gary Trent. You and I said from day one that we needed to use him as an asset, but a lot of fans were like, oh, you got to keep Gary Trent. You got to re-sign Gary Trent. He's really good. And he can shoot really good threes and stuff. So we got to keep him. He's definitely great. I don't know, man. To me, it's not that big of a deal. I like Anthony's potential. I understand that right now people want us to go all in. I just don't think that Neil would have been willing to give up, because he was definitely thinking about doing that Gary Trent deal. He didn't want to give up both of our young guards just in case a Dame or CJ injury does happen. And I understand that you don't want to sacrifice. You want to go all in for playoffs. You want to have like a 7 or 8 man rotation, and you just want to dominate people with your top 3 stars like Denver is doing right now. But look at Jamal Murray. He hurts his knee, and now Denver's title hopes are pretty much out the door. So I get it. I do. I understand it. But at the same time, it doesn't really bother me. What would bother me is if we were in the mix to get a superstar and he wouldn't include Anthony in the deal. It depends on how you see Aaron Gordon. We don't see him as that great piece. So
I agree. And I think that's what it comes down to now. If there's any other move out there and it would have been a bigger name, then I think that might have also enticed Neil to make the move. So people are just hot on Aaron Gordon right now because he was just the big Blazers rumor, so he was in everybody's minds, and then that kind of causes you to follow him a little bit more. So then when you see how good Denver was, obviously before the Murray injury, and how good their defensive was with him on the floor and what he's been giving the team, it's pure happenstance that he was able to be as good as he's been. And you look back on that, and I think it really determines a lot of how people's minds are with the Anthony thing. So, I mean, I wish that he would have included him in other deals, but for Gordon, I'm kind of glad he didn't.
So question. This is, I mean, I want a perspective on this. Who do you think is more on the quote unquote hot seat? Do you think it's Olshey or do you think it's Stotts this year?
Stotts. It's always going to be the coach first. Because what people are going to look at is that Olshey brought in Covington and Jones, and you have two of the better scoring guards in the league, and there's all that stuff that comes in. I mean, really, I'm not mad at Olshey. I think he's did what he tried to do to get the defense on the team. I don't like the Melo thing. That's kind of on Olshey to bring him back, but he was so helpful for us last year. There's that weird sense that we kind of owe you. Thank you. Here, let's let you continue to build your legacy. It puts Portland on the map and the national scene, which is kind of cool. But at the same time, it almost forces Stotts to have to use him. It doesn't force him. He's still the head coach, but you know what I mean? Like, you get a guy like that, you play him. And so that's the one blunder. I mean, trading for Cantor for $5 million, the way that he's been playing for us, and obviously with Nurk getting hurt, we needed him. Yeah. So I don't think Olshey. I don't think Olshey is quite on the hot seat yet. If he doesn't make some big time moves to continue to work around Dame, that's a different story. But again, we talked about going all in for a guy like Covington, and those moves are what's going to keep him alive. I think Stotts, with the bad playoff run, with the fans being the way they are, I think that kind of turns things on him. All the attention's on him. I think that they're going to listen to that. Neil's going to see that. He's going to see what the fans are saying. He's going to see how this team performs. And if they don't perform well, I would say that Stotts is definitely on the hot seat, and probably rightfully so.
Probably. Yeah, I think it's the drum beat is getting louder for Fire Stotts. It's kind of sad, and I'm torn on it still, even to this day. I know last week I was kind of off Stotts. This week I'm still torn. I think it's going to happen if we get in a dangerous playoff seed. Okay, so moving on, just kind of going through, let's talk about what we're going to look at this week before we do Blazing New Trails, Trailblazing Blaze of Player of the Week. So
that podcast fast for me.
So we play the Hornets today at 4:00. It's a little early. It's 1:00 when we're recording today. We play the Hornets today at 4. We play the Clippers on Tuesday at home. Then we play the Nuggets at home on Wednesday. So the back-to-back is Clippers and Nuggets. And then we play the Grizzlies on Friday. So we play 3 playoff opponents in 5 this week in 4 days, basically.
Charlotte's a playoff team in the East. Oh, they were. I guess I'd have to look.
Yeah, but the East playoff race is like 4 good teams and then a bunch of participation trophies. You know what I mean? Like, but no, the Hornets have been actually like decent since LaMelo got hurt. They've had Devontae Graham and stuff like that. They've kind of been going crazy.
Well, that's the fun thing about this game. That's going to be the one for tonight is they know LaMelo because he's done probably for the year. There's talks he might be able to come back for playoffs, but probably for the year. Hayward had the CJ foot thing, so he I think sprained his foot or hurt his foot. And anyway, so he's out for 4, 5, 6 weeks potentially. So he's not going to be there tonight, which is big because those are a lot of guys that can move the ball around. We talked about it last time we played them. Ball movement with Charlotte's a big deal. We ended up taking care of business, but they're no scrubs. They're still got a lot of athleticism on that team. I mean, Rozier is still great. Mikal Bridges is it Mikal? Which one is it? There's 2 Bridges out there.
Yes.
Michael? Is it Michael? Is he the Michael Bridges? No, he's the Mikal.
No.
Is it Mikal? Michael?
He's Miles.
Whatever.
Miles
they got a bridge
Bridges.
on their team. They got a mile? Okay.
Miles
they got a bridge.
Bridges. Yeah.
Whatever.
He's
the
a dunker,
Bridges,
though. He's crazy athletic.
They're both the same player. They're extremely athletic role players that are just great athletic starting forward. So, yeah, either way, they got one of the Bridges on there, and he's just fun to watch. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Charlotte's one of those teams you don't want to take lightly. No Dame tonight. So you heard it here on Rip City Real Talk. Greg's over here just informing me.
I think they ruled him out.
I didn't think he was going to play.
I thought I saw that they ruled him out. In fact, I thought I saw Chad doing it said like, "Oh, Dame's out, thank goodness," because he's really excited.
He's all about the Dame rest, and I can understand that.
The fact that I have to go to Twitter to pull this up is a little scary, but oh well. Okay.
Well, regardless,
he's out. He's out. Yep. It was actually
out.
Last night. Jamie Hudson came out and said that he was out, so he got declared out early.
Got it. Okay, so that makes sense. I mean, I hadn't looked today, but I figured. I knew he would be at least questionable. So no Dame again. So you're running that same crew. Jones is going to be out there with CJ, Powell, and
I'm
then
good with that.
obviously Nurk and Rocco. So, yeah, it gives us a little bit more flexibility, a little more defense on the floor, which, again, you're going to need against a team like this. They pass the ball like crazy. They move around. A lot of guys cut. So you're going to want to have that wingspan, the tip balls, and all that stuff's going to make a big difference. I'm looking forward to tonight. I don't think we have a problem with them.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I mean,
Yeah.
I just don't see them without two of their stars being able to keep up with us, even though we don't have any all stars ourselves. I just think the continuity is there for us over them, and I think it's an easy win. I would be too worried. I mean, every game seems to be close with us, but I still think we take care of things at the end.
I think the biggest test for me is going to be the Clippers this week. I mean, you look at the Clippers and you think not only are they a good team, but I think they're the team we're going to draw in the first round. I just have this weird gut feeling every time we played them this year, and they're playing Rondo a little bit more, and Reggie Jackson looked really good against us, and obviously Kawhi and Paul George. So that's going to be the one. And I want to see Stotts do something defensively, throw something at them, give them a different look, and we'll talk about it next week. But that's going to be the one that I'm putting a circle around on my notes this week.
Yep, Dame's gonna have plenty of time to rest now. He's not playing these last two games, so he hasn't played since Friday.
Yep, so 4 days rest.
Or no, he hasn't played since what, Wednesday?
It was Wednesday,
The
yeah.
Boston game. So yeah, so it's a lot of time for him to get right. Hopefully that hamstring heals up, let his knee heal up a little bit so that he can be a full go, because we haven't looked good against them. We seem to stay competitive for a majority of the game, but that's just a lot of length and a lot of shooting that team has. And when you have two superstar wings, any team's going to struggle with the Clippers. It's going to how it's going to be all year. They did just lose to Philly in a big game. That was, I think, Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of those situations to keep an eye on. Is they're going to be a little upset, and they take us seriously. I think they are the same way. They feel that we're going to be their first round pick. I think we win enough games to keep above the Mavericks right now. Keep the 6th seed. We'll talk more about that as we get close to the last couple weeks of the season. But
Dallas just keeps finding ways to lose. I don't know how to explain it, but every time I look at their games, they just find a way to lose, and I don't know what the situation is with that. But I really hope that we don't have to go to the playoff or play-in tournament, because I don't want to be in it. I just don't. I trust our experience and all that stuff. I just don't want to be in it.
No, I hear you. And it's just extra games that we saw. Like we talked about it. We saw what that does in the bubble. Yep. It's just not good to have to play the extra couple games in a competitive setting against obviously a playoff team or a playoff potential team. They're fighting for playoffs. Yeah. You don't want to deal with that and then run into the first round against somebody who's just already had a good season, and B, gets the rest a little longer than you. So I think we keep that 6th seed. And so I think I agree with you. I want to continue to see us be competitive. I don't care if we beat the Clippers. It's not about losing to the Clippers to me. It's about competing. Yeah. I want to have something that I can say, you know what, we did good in this. You're playing against one of the top teams in the league. I'm not mad we lost by a couple points. I don't want to get blown out again. I'm sick of them blowing us out. And they do it with the 3-point ball and the shooting percentage overall. Mm-hmm. They're hard to defend. We talked about our small guards, and when they have two wings that can do anything they want, shoot, drive, draw fouls, stop you, it's always going to be a tough matchup for us regardless, but I need to see some kind of potential in the competitive level. So that's what I'm looking for. And then you said right after that we have Denver, so no Murray.
Yeah, no Murray, and then we play the Grizzlies twice. So we won't talk about the second game on the pod, but the first game is on Friday night. So we have, like you said, 4 playoff teams, even though Charlotte's been a little bit down in the East. I think you look at this weekend, it's going to be huge. The other thing is we're only 2 losses ahead of the Mavs right now. So if we drop 3 of 4 this week, it's all bets are off, man. And the other thing is Memphis, we play them twice, and they're only 3 losses behind us. So if we lose to those are actually really big games down the stretch. Those are the ones that you look at the end of the season and you say, well, dang, if we had won if we beat Memphis in one of those 2 games, instead of going 0 for 2 against them, we would have been the 6th seed instead of the 7. And it's just, I don't want to be doing that this year. I really want to feel good about going into a Clippers or Phoenix matchup and thinking, okay, if we just outplay them and we just shoot better than they do, and we have the best player on the floor, which at any given time, Dame can be the best player in a series. It just depends on how everything is working for us.
Yeah, agreed. So we'll see. We'll recap it. I mean, the big thing is just to stay competitive, and you obviously want to try to go 500 or better. We talk about it on the pod. That's our motto. Hasn't been so great lately, but it's a matter of competing and just continuing to show that when you get into playoffs and guys get completely right, and Nurk is going full gear and Dame's, hopefully full gear, et cetera, that you can compete with these teams. That's all I'm looking for. I don't even care that. Well, I mean, I don't want to lose to Memphis. I think we're clearly the better team. But if you're going to go out there and lose to even Denver, I mean, I know that they don't have Murray, but they still have just a plethora of wings, and
Mm-hmm.
Jokic is still going to be one of the best players on the floor at all times. So I'm not going to be upset. Again, want to see him compete. But we'll see. We'll talk about it next week. Could be a rough week. Could be a great week. You never know. That being said, my friends, I do think I want to transition as we get to the end of the pod to kind of end on some. It depends on how you are as a fan, but some potential fun stuff. So it's the Blazing New Trails Player of the Week, and I think this is an easy one. We've already done them once, but LaMarcus Aldridge, he had some heart issues that caused him to not play well. He looked at the team doctors with the Nets and went and dealt with his own doctors and decided that with some irregular heartbeats, he is retired prematurely. I think it was probably within the next couple of years he was done anyway, but he went out the way that Bosch went out. He had the irregular heartbeats. Just, you don't want to risk it, man. Guy's made enough money. He's made enough of a legacy with us and the Spurs now to where you don't need to keep playing. And I mean, it would have been great to see him potentially get a ring with Brooklyn, but at the same time, you got to do what you got to do. Health is always going to come first. And so kind of sad for him. I mean, it sucks to go out that way and not on your own terms, but he's had a great career. I mean, I want to talk to you about this, man. I'm just interested to see kind of where you're at. There's been a lot of back and forth. I think a lot of fans respect Aldridge now, but there's a lot of back and forth whether or not you consider him one of the greatest Blazers of all time, whether or not we should retire his jersey, whether or not you really hate him for leaving us. Personally, I'm all about 12. Give me the 12. But I'm interested to see where you're at with it and how you feel.
Man, LaMarcus was a revelation for the Blazers. He came in at this time where we'd been down for a long time, and he and Brandon Roy really uplifted the franchise into a place where it was respectable again. We went through the early 2000s and jail Blazers, and you and I were really young, and we were just beginning our Blazer fandom in kind of the mid 2000s there. And then when we drafted, I would say when we drafted Brandon Roy and LaMarcus Aldridge, that was the first time I really started studying the Blazers, and I started studying tape, and I started saying, okay, this is what we can be. And then, we drafted Dame. And when we drafted Dame, LaMarcus had the second half of his career, or second half of his Blazer career, that was unbelievable. I mean, if you go back and you watch the 2014 Houston series, which I know everybody's talked about, if you go back and he was, I think people forget that he was not just like a really good Blazer. He was an all NBA player. He was definitely I mean, when you talk about LaMarcus, to me, I think he's a top 5 Blazer. I mean, I wasn't around for Bill Walton. I wasn't around for Clyde Drexler that much, so I can't compare him like top 3. But to me, in my Blazers, it goes Dame, Brandon Roy, and LaMarcus. Those are my 3, just with our age and where we're at. So I don't think we should retire his jersey, but I do think that the sting of him leaving in 2016 will fade in time. I just think in like 3 to 4 years, people will forget about it once he's out of the league. Blazer fans don't really have they have a great memory. We hold on to everything, but I think people need to let it go with the LaMarcus 2016. That was just a different era of the NBA then,
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I would say he's definitely a top 5 Blazer. Yes. I mean, you can't put him over overall Clyde or Bill Walton or Dame at this point, but I could definitely, I mean, I saw some people talk about that era. Brandon Roy, to me, will not be a top 5 Blazer. I mean, he's going to be a top 5 Blazer in our hearts, but his career-wise, unfortunately, it just got cut so short. It's one of the travesties of this team, because I think if Roy and Oden stay healthy with LaMarcus and Batum and some of those other guys that really were there with us, this team would have been dominant. It really would have been dominant. You would have had scoring between your guards, scoring with your bigs. It's just that era is going to be known for the injuries. And the one guy to really come out of that fire was LaMarcus. And he kept us consistent, and he kept us as one of the top teams in the West for a small market leading into the Dame era, coming out of that Roy era. I mean, what's weird with LaMarcus, I mean, yeah, you had the Houston series, and there's been some other moments, but to me, he's never done anything overly splashy. And maybe that's just because his personality. When Dame hits a big shot, he does the Dame time. He's got his thing. He waves at Oklahoma City when he knocks him out. I mean, there's some stuff about Dame that, as a personality, has a different kind of fire than LaMarcus had with his career with Portland. But I just think that Lamarcus consistency. I mean, there was never a game you went in there where he's not going to get 20, 25 points a game unless he's banged up or draws a. I mean, there's always flukes, but you knew as a team, like, all right, we get Lamarcus the ball and he's going to get his little post up shot and he's going to hit it. I don't think I've ever seen a more dominant big guy shooting wise. Maybe not from the 3-point line. I mean, a lot of guys nowadays are hitting threes left and right, but I think from the mid range game, it's a dying breed. Not since like Tim Duncan. I mean, it was just something with a guy of his size being able to turn around and shoot that shot over and over. It's a dying breed. The power forward position realistically is a dying breed. I mean, we haven't seen that kind of a power forward in a long time.
I mean, he's a top three. He's a top 3 scoring power forward. Like when you talk about like Dirk and Carmelo and that style, that silky smooth footwork, lots of post moves, that's a dying breed, and it's not going to be in the NBA in like 5 years, I don't think. I just think once Cantor and Melo and a lot of these guys that do their work on the low block are gone, Jokic may keep it intact, but Porzingis was supposed to be one of those guys, and he could never materialize, and he can't stay healthy. But
when Anthony Davis, those other guys for sure, but they do everything. There's a difference. They can all hit threes, and they can all, that's the thing. That's what makes them so hard to guard, and that's why the league is changing. Like if you're a big guy who can't shoot a 3 or pass anymore, like it's rough to find minutes. I mean, you look at Andre Drummond. Like you look at Andre Drummond 10 years ago, 15 years ago, he's a superstar, just dominant down low, and it's just a different era. And I think it was cool to get to watch Marcus as part of this team. To me, he's 3rd overall in points. He's 1st overall in blocks, and he's, I think, 4th in rebounds. He was up there with rebounds for the Blazers, or maybe it was vice versa. He might be number 1 in rebounds. You have those kinds of numbers and some of those key stats, and what he did for this team with the injuries to Roy and Oden, this team could have been terrible until going into the Dame era. And that's if we even get Dame. I mean, you never know how these things are going to turn around, but the bottom line is you're talking about a guy there who was never really a born leader. He was never one of those guys that had the personality to fire up a team. He just did his job, and he was super consistent, and he was able to keep Portland a 4 or 5 seed almost every single year.
Yeah. And so when people look back to, I think when people look back to, they look at us in 2016 and they think, okay, well, the Blazers had a lot of money and they could have, if we could have got LaMarcus and kept CJ and all this stuff. Well, at that time in 2016, CJ was nowhere near the player he is now.
He was a second-year guy. It was his rookie year when LaMarcus's last year.
Exactly. And the other thing is when you're looking at Portland during that time, so when LaMarcus went to San Antonio, not only was Texas home for him, he was pairing up with Kawhi, and he was playing for the greatest coach in NBA history in Greg Popovich. So he was going to get no income tax in Texas. He was going home. He's pairing up with one of the budding superstars in the league. I understand Dame is of a similar caliber, but I just don't think people analyze. They think, oh, he just didn't like us anymore and he left Portland. It's like, San Antonio was a once in a lifetime opportunity for him, and I think he had to check that off of his bucket list. And if they would have won 2 rings or whatever, and Kawhi would have stayed, and that fallout wouldn't have happened, we would look at this as a different legacy. And I'm so sad he can't get a ring with Brooklyn, because of a lot of the guys in the NBA, he really deserved one, and he was loyal to me, to Portland. I understand 16 was a weird year, but I understood his decision.
Loyalty is a different thing. I don't know if he was necessarily loyal to Portland, because if you're loyal to Portland, you keep the money and you stay there. We could have paid him more than any other team.
Yeah.
I just don't care about the loyalty. Like, I know that seems weird, and I know that's going to rub some people the wrong way, but I mean, loyalty is and here's the other thing that bugs me. And the only thing that I give to any fan who's upset about him leaving for the most part is I wish he wouldn't have come out and been like, I want to be the greatest Blazer of all time. That, to me, he says he's going to be here forever. And then the first chance he gets, contract up, he's gone. That bugged me. If he would never have said something like that, and he never demanded a trade, he did his job. He filled out a contract. He played through a couple contracts, gave us 9 years. And I'm sorry, we didn't get past the second round with him. If I'm him, I completely understand going to play with a team that just won the NBA championship and going to play with Popovich. You're replacing Tim Duncan. Like, how the Spurs have handled power forwards and the role you're going to get and potentially get the run through. And so that I don't mind him leaving. I don't think he bailed on us. He didn't owe us anything necessarily, but I think the fact that he came out and said what he said, like, that's what stings. I mean, it's even with Dame right now. I mean, Dame all day. Oh, I'm going to be loyal. I think guys are super teams. I don't agree with it. who knows,
Yeah.
man? I mean, he's signed the Supermax, so he's kind of locked in for a while. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's the same thing. Like, it's like sometimes you don't believe a guy like Dame now, and he says that because we were so stung by what LaMarcus said, and he
I,
just bolted the first chance he got.
I think that might be a blessing in disguise. I think LaMarcus leaving the way he did, maybe showing Dame, okay, man, I got to stay in Portland. I got to stay loyal to these people because I don't want to leave a tarnished legacy on the Blazers.
Right.
If you want, and he could be the best Blazer of all time. And what is honestly the difference between getting one ring because he went to the Lakers at the end of his championship, or having a fantastic career as the best Blazer of all time, hands down, and being a top 5 NBA 3-point shooter? It's just, to me, like, we can talk legacy later and do all that stuff, but to me, I think Dame learned from the LaMarcus thing, and he knows he can build something special on a career long staying loyal in Portland. So I don't know. It's just a glass is half full situation, I think.
So my last little bit on this before we wrap this
Do it.
LaMarcus Memorial, whatever you want to call it, wrapped up.
Yeah.
So do you think if LaMarcus stays for 4 or 5 years that we are a championship caliber team? With Dame, CJ would have
Yeah.
been a second year coming into that contract. Now you're obviously going to lose Matthews. You're probably going to lose Batum because I don't think you pay him. Now I don't know if Batum would have taken less money to come back. He seemed really upset that they
Saw that.
broke the team. So yeah, so I wonder how much of that was like, well, screw it, I'm gone because they don't want me back and I can go make this money in Charlotte. Or if
Yeah.
it's like, you know what, we're bringing LaMarcus back. Dame is like, I mean, but maybe Batum stays in a cheaper deal. So let's say Batum stays.
Yeah.
Let's say you have LaMarcus, you have Dame and Lillard or Dame and CJ in their rookie contracts, and let's just say you get Nurk because none of this impacted us trading Plumlee, who was our starting center at the time, for Nurk. So let's say you still make that move when you bring in Nurk. Now Nurk, LaMarcus, Batum, Dame, and CJ is your starting 5. Fill out the rest later.
Yep.
How do you feel about that roster, man? Is that
I
is that it?
Yeah, I think a lot of fans would say yes. I would say no. I don't think that defensively you would have been able to play Dame, CJ, and LaMarcus all at the same time. The other thing is there's only one ball, and I know it's a superstar-driven league, and people love
Mm-hmm.
watching the Nets play, but Kyrie and KD are good defenders. I mean, they're plus defenders. Harden may not be, but he can do what he needs to do, and they can hide him. When you're talking about playing 3 negative defenders at the same time, because LaMarcus tried, but he is a mismatch on defense, similar to CJ at times. I don't think we would have. Would we have had a much better shot other than paying Evan Turner, Alan Crabb, Myers Leonard, and Mo Harkless, whatever, $80 million we paid them? Yeah, probably. We probably would have been a better team. But here's the other thing that you have to think about. Would CJ have become a 25 point per game scorer in the league if he's deferring to LaMarcus for 3/4 of a game, Dame and LaMarcus for
Mm-hmm.
3/4 of a game? Would CJ become not an all-star caliber player, but one of the best secondary weapons in the league? Would we have one of the best backcourts in the league? Would that have ever materialized, or would CJ have been casualty of Dame and LaMarcus taking 50 shots a game? I don't know, but to me, I just don't see a recipe for a championship there. Do you?
I do.
Okay.
I mean, I think you were a championship contender.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, let's say during that era, that would have been the Golden State era, realistically. So
State.
you would have had the last 4 or 5 years would have been the Golden State era.
Yeah.
I think you could have competed, but you would have had definitely 2 superstars. I mean, maybe you don't call LaMarcus a superstar, but he's definitely above tier average all-star. And I think that's been the biggest problem with Portland this entire time is that we only have one true all-star. CJ's just never put up the all-star caliber numbers. He's been a consistent threat, but his career, I mean, he's been 21 points. This year has been an exception, but 21 points a game in really quiet points, if you want to put it that way. So I think having a guy like LaMarcus that can basically take over one half of the floor, and then having Dame being able to do whatever he wants on the other side or hitting threes because he can feed it to LaMarcus. The pick and roll game is much better. And then if you think about the fact that you probably still end up with a Nurk, if that's a guy that Neil wanted to get. Now, this is all hypothetical, but you have Batum out there in his prime. He's still one of the elite wing defenders. I mean, he's obviously getting old now, but during that stretch, I think you can argue that he would make up for a lot of what Dame and CJ and even LaMarcus. I do think you have those guys in their youth and the contracts that they would have gotten at that time. You could have had elite bench guys, all sorts of good vets on that team potentially. I love to imagine it. I mean, I don't know, man.
It's probably like a top 5 what if you're a Blazer fan. So it goes like Michael Jordan, Sam Bowie, Greg Oden, Kevin Durant. Those are the top 2. But then if you look at, I would say it's a really close third between either Brandon Roy's health or LaMarcus stays in 2016, because I do agree with you. If you could just beat out like Golden State 1 year, maybe it was 2018 or something like that. If you'd had LaMarcus, maybe you could have mismatched them. But I think it's probably a top 5 Blazer what if.
I love that. We're gonna have to do that. We're gonna officially do that next week. I mean, I know we've already basically just listed off 4 of them, but I'm gonna officially do that and rank them. I want to do that top 5 what ifs. I don't think anybody's done that yet. I love that idea. So
Let's do it.
cool. But that's honestly all I have on LaMarcus. I mean, it was a big deal for Blazers fans. I think when you see, I know he hasn't been a Blazer since 16, but he still had that impact on this team.
He was huge.
He basically kept the bridge going from the Brandon Roy potential era that we would have had into the Dame era. I mean, he kept us consistent. So, I mean, I personally, I would retire his jersey. I think when you're top 3 in all those different stats, top 5 in all those different stats all time, you put in 9 seasons with 5 All-Stars, you do all that different stuff, and you absolutely deserve to have your jersey hanging in the Blazers rafters. So if that happens, I guarantee you I'll be at that game. I'll be wearing this jersey proud. I don't care what he did in 2016. I mean, like you said, it'll die off. People didn't get mad at Clyde when Clyde left and went to Houston. I mean, he's still considered one of the greatest Blazers. So, yeah, man, for sure. I'm looking forward to that. But that's all I have on the LaMarcus stuff. Do you have anything else for this week?
So there's a few things I want to talk about. I do want to wrap fairly soon. I know people are probably ready to wrap, but the thing is, so we're on Spotify now. We have that up and running. We'll be on Apple Podcasts soon, and hopefully on Google Podcasts soon. But if you're having a hard time listening on YouTube, in fact, we'll try to shout that out at the start of next week's video. We'll say we're on Spotify now. We are also really active on Twitter, so please hit us up if there's any questions or feedback that you have. And then the other thing is, you were working really hard to negotiate a guest this week. It kind of fell through, and that's totally fine because it's a busy Blazer week, but maybe next week we'll be looking into a guest. Do you want to reveal, or do you want to keep it a mystery?
I'll keep it a mystery because I don't want to put that person under the bus in case we don't get it. We have a couple of things we're working on, but yeah, we definitely want to keep getting people in here. We love the fan questions, so keep that up. We're getting on most podcast sites, not just Apple, Google, and Spotify. Spotify, I know we're up officially. We're waiting on Google to get us on there, but I think Pod Addict, there's a couple of them where we're starting to get on pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. We should be up and running here pretty soon. If you search for us and don't see us and you're interested in listening to us outside of the video version, let us know what you do listen to. We'll do our best to, get that on the list, start getting our episodes out there, but we are working on getting the audio versions up. Spotify being the main one right now, Apple coming pretty quick, and then Google as well.
Yep, and we had a ton of YouTube comments last week, which was really fun. If you want to ask us anything or say anything, a lot of times people say, oh, well, I want to hear this on the pod, or I want you guys to talk about this. We'll talk about it, man. We got nothing but time on our hands. We try to do an hour and a half every week for you guys. So, it's all for the fans. Just let us know what you need and we'll do it for you.
We continue to appreciate the support for sure. That being said, man, let's hope we get a win against Charlotte and this week goes well. We'll be back to talk to you guys next week. Again, feed us your questions, whatever the case is. Follow where you can, subscribe where you can, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
And we out.